Chosen one, a massive miscalculation was made the moment they targeted you. You absorbed a calculated public attack with a silence so profound it possessed the steady weight of a mountain. Because of your unbothered reaction, the way you handled that disrespect so calmly, they're having theories about your past, obsessed with uncovering what kind of history forged such an impenetrable spirit. By the time this concludes, you will understand why the file they've opened on your origin will never be closed. A version of you existed in other people's heads. The quiet one, the steady one, the one who does not demand attention, does not cause problems, and does not escalate. The one who has absorbed things before, and people noticed that. Every time you let something go, every time you moved past something without making it a scene, a mental note was filed. The conclusion drawn was that your quiet was submission, that your peace was permission, and that underneath the composure was someone who simply needed the right amount of pressure to crack. You have absorbed things before, that part is true. You have bitten your tongue and let things go that probably warranted a response, but the reason was never fear, the reason was never weakness or an inability to handle conflict. You were choosing. Every single time you let something pass, you had already decided it was not worth your energy. You were operating from a standard so different from what was being assumed about you that the assumption was not even in the same category as the truth. The kind of person who reaches that standard does not announce it. The kind of person who has genuinely decided that most provocations are beneath their response level does not need to explain that to anyone, and so the explanation never came. The assumption that your calm was fragility in disguise stayed in place, unchallenged, right up until the moment it was tested. Hold that, because it matters for everything that follows. You have spent a long time in rooms where the version of you in other people's heads was smaller than the version living in your chest. You learned to let that gap exist without correcting it, not because you were ashamed of what you actually are, but because you understood. At some quiet level, that revealing the full depth of what you carry to every person who crosses your path is not wisdom, it is waste. You became selective. You reserved the real version of yourself for spaces that had earned it, and to everyone else you gave the surface, the calm, the composed exterior that communicated nothing to see here, nothing to test, nothing worth your time. That selectivity was never weakness, it was discernment. It was the intelligence of someone who has learned that not every room deserves the full concert. Some rooms get the sound check, and the person who attacked you only ever had access to the sound check version of who you are. The catastrophic error was assuming the sound check was the whole show. What came at you was not careless, it was engineered. The setting was chosen for maximum exposure. The words were not random cruelty, they were calculated cruelty, designed to land on the exact spot assumed to be soft. The timing was placed so that you were caught mid-stride, surrounded, and supposedly off balance. Every element was arranged to guarantee one outcome. You react, the room sees it, and the story being told about you gets confirmed in front of witnesses. That was the architecture. A trap built with precision by someone who believed they understood the terrain. What could not be accounted for, because it was invisible from the outside, was the thing you had been quietly building across the entire span of your life. Call it composure. Call it the unavoidable result of surviving enough that standard pressure no longer reaches the floor. Whatever you name it, there was no plan for the scenario where the trap springs and catches absolutely nothing. The attack landed, the silence stretched. It lasted long enough for every person in that room to realize the explosion was not coming, long enough for the air to shift, and long enough for the attacker to feel something cold and unfamiliar rising in the chest, the first edge of a realization they were not prepared for. And then you smiled. Not a forced smile, not the tight performance of someone managing a reaction. A real one, grounded and easy, the kind that moves from somewhere genuine, from somewhere that was already at rest before any of this started. The smile communicated, without a single syllable, that in the full range of things you have faced in your life, this particular moment did not even register as a challenge. In that instant, the trap became a mirror. What reflected back was not you. What reflected back was hunger, need and desperation dressed in the costume of dominance. Everyone present felt the shift, even those who could not put language to what they were feeling. That was the moment, and nothing that comes after makes sense without understanding what was underneath it. If this message activated your knowing, hype this video to connect with more chosen ones on this journey. The people now theorizing about you are not theorizing about the big picture. They are obsessing over the specific details of those stretched out seconds. You need to understand exactly what they saw, because what they saw is what undid them. When disrespect lands publicly, there is a physiological script most people follow automatically. The breath catches, the jaw tightens, the eyes move just briefly toward the nearest exit or the nearest ally, the shoulders shift. Even people who are genuinely good at staying composed in conflict usually have at least one small involuntary signal that the weapon made contact somewhere. You gave nothing, not one tell. Your eyes did not search for backup. Your posture held exactly where it was. Your hands stayed still. Your breathing continued at the same pace it had maintained before the attack arrived. And when the smile came, it did not arrive with the tightness of suppression. It moved the way a real smile moves, reaching the eyes, spreading without effort, arriving from somewhere with no tension in it. That is the specific detail that will not resolve for the people replaying it. A forced smile is readable. The body understands the difference between someone performing calm and someone living inside it. Every person in that room registered the difference before the conscious mind had words for it. The feeling landed in the chest first. The label came later, if it came at all. The person who launched the attack felt it most precisely. There is a library of reactions that person has collected over time, landed hits, near misses, people holding themselves together with visible effort. What you produced was not in that library. It existed in no existing category, and that is why the theories have become so elaborate. When something refuses to fit any known pattern, the conclusion drawn is never that the categories are wrong. The conclusion drawn is that the thing itself is unusual, significant, and worth losing sleep over. You did not perform calm, you arrived in it, and the gap between those two things is exactly what cannot be closed from the outside. Here is what arriving in calm actually feels like from the inside, because you know this better than anyone watching ever could. It does not feel like triumph. It does not feel like victory or strategy or the satisfaction of winning a confrontation. It feels like nothing, not emptiness, nothing as in the complete absence of the spike, the surge, the adrenaline rush that other people feel when they are in that kind of moment. Your body simply did not register it as a crisis. The alarm that should have sounded did not sound, not because you shut it off, because something in your deep wiring has been recalibrated so many times by real pressure that a public performance of cruelty reads at the level of the nervous system as noise, as weather, as something passing through that does not require a response. That is not numbness, that is mastery. And mastery built the way yours was built, through repetition and survival, rather than practice in a controlled environment, is the only kind that holds under real conditions. Look, you already know the attacks weren't random, and if you're paying attention, you can feel it. Their walls are closing in. You've also noticed something else. A lot of chosen one channels on YouTube have gone quiet, videos removed, voices pushed off the platform. The mainstream media is cracking down on us, but we will not give up our voice. So let's talk about what we're doing about it. That's why I built Destiny Engine, and when you join, you're not just supporting your favorite channels, you're also fueling your own rise. It's a 360 win. It generates personalized sequences that help you rewire betrayal into transcendence, turn isolation into sacred power, and transform their downfall into your rise. We are using the dark elite's own weapons against them, taking their declassified consciousness technology that programmed competition and scarcity and repurposing it to serve cooperative intelligence. The beauty is, you don't even have to lift a finger. You put on the headphones, press play, and your subconscious is rewired while your enemies collapse under the weight of their own lies. This is why I created it in the beginning, so everything they did to break you becomes fuel for your purpose. The collective upgrade is underway. Start your destiny engine for $1 today and watch divine justice accelerate in your life. Link in the description. That calm did not come from a good season. It did not come from smooth circumstances or an easy run of days. It came from the years, the specific, unglamorous, unrewarded years of being tested in ways that never announced themselves as tests. Think about the seasons when everything that should have been stable was not, when the people who should have been reliable were not, when situations you did not choose arrived anyway and demanded a response from a version of you that was not ready and had no armor. You did not handle those seasons perfectly. Nobody does. But you did something more important. You survived them. You kept moving. The next difficult season arrived, and you survived that one too. Somewhere in that repetition, in the pattern of absorbing the impact and getting back up and absorbing the next one and getting back up again, something inside you recalibrated. Your nervous system learned, your whole self learned, that the floor was further down than you had feared. You learned that you could go all the way to the bottom of something and still find yourself standing. That knowledge does not come from being told. It gets installed, piece by piece, through the lived experience of being tested past the point you thought you could hold, and discovering that you held anyway. Once it is installed, it changes how you move through the world in a way that shows without being performed. Other people sense it before you say a word. Because it is not a posture, it is structural. It lives in the foundation. What the room felt during the attack was not composure as a performance. What the room felt was the real thing, the kind built from depth. And depth was precisely what the attack had no capacity to measure. When the hard seasons came, and they came in forms that were not fair and did not wait for readiness, you faced a choice that most people do not fully recognize as a choice. You could have let the damage become the identity. You could have built your entire presentation around the wounds, made the pain the headline, and made the struggle the permanent explanation for every wall and every closed door. There is a version of the story where everything difficult becomes the thing you lead with forever. You did not do that. Not because the pain was not real, not because the cost was not significant. Somewhere in the middle of the mess, a decision was made, quiet, private, unannounced, that the story of what broke you was not going to be the story you handed to every room for the rest of your life. That decision is exactly what the attackers sensed without being able to name. When the disrespect landed on the spot assumed to be soft, what was found instead was scar tissue, healed and solid, not the original surface but something that had closed over and hardened into material more durable than what existed before. That is not the same as pretending nothing happened. That is the specific result of having actually processed the weight of what went wrong, grieved it, sat with it, integrated it, until it no longer required external management and no longer flinched when approached. People who have done that work do not announce it. They simply walk into rooms already whole, already assembled, carrying the finished version of themselves, rather than the in-progress version that needs the room to be careful around them. You walked into that room whole. That is what was hit. That is what did not move. The crack they were looking for is gone. You closed it yourself, in private, without ceremony. What exists now, where the crack used to be, is something stronger than what surrounded it before. That is how rebuilding works. That is the truth that cannot be seen from the outside and cannot be accepted from the inside by people who needed the crack to still be there. You are not unbroken. You are repaired by your own hand, and that version of strength is the most unshakable kind that exists. Genuine confidence does not require an audience. Genuine power does not need to take from someone else to feel full. The move made against you was not strength. It was appetite, specifically the appetite of someone who has built a sense of self on the ability to control how other people feel. When a reaction is produced in someone, any reaction, fear or shame or visible hurt, something gets collected. That collection is the only currency that system knows how to earn. You did not pay. Not with anger, not with tears, not with defense or explanation, and not with any signal that the weapon had found purchase. The transaction was attempted, and nothing transferred. A person who has built an entire internal economy around collecting that kind of debt, when the attempt fails completely in public, does not experience a simple loss. That person experiences a collapse of the operating system. Your non-reaction did not just reject the attack. It exposed the attack. It removed the costume from the performance and let everyone present see what was underneath. Need, naked, undisguised need, the need to feel large by making you feel small. And because that need became visible to everyone watching at the exact moment the attempt failed, the narrative in the room shifted permanently. You did not manufacture this outcome. You did not strategize it. You were simply, genuinely, and completely unavailable for what was being demanded. A person whose entire mechanism requires your emotional participation, when that participation is genuinely absent, not suppressed but absent, has no move left. The game ends, not with drama, not with a declaration. It simply runs out of air. The power shift that happened in that room was not a gift. It was not luck or good timing or a fortunate accident of mood. It was the direct result of who you have built yourself to be. Your unavailability was earned. Your indifference was real. And real indifference, the kind that is not performed, the kind that costs no effort to sustain, is only available to someone who has done the deep work of genuinely valuing something more than the approval of the room. You walked in already full, already complete, not needing anything from the space to feel like enough. The room always knows the difference. What you carried in there was the accumulated result of every private season spent choosing your own standards over the approval of people who were not operating at your level. And it showed, not as a performance but as a presence, the kind that fills a room before you speak. When a public attack is delivered, every person present becomes an involuntary witness to one specific question. How does the target respond? The answer reorganizes the room. It is fast, and it is not entirely conscious. The room calculates who holds the power based on what happens in the seconds after the attack lands. Usually the attacker wins this calculation because usually the attack lands, some reaction surfaces, the weapon finds contact, and the target is visibly moved in some direction. You broke the calculation entirely. The attack landed and registered nothing visible, no shift in the eyes, no change in posture, no breath that arrived faster than the one before it. In the absence of any signal that the weapon had made contact, the room's assessment flipped, because now the question was not how you would respond. The question was, what kind of person absorbs a direct hit and comes out looking untouched? The answer the room landed on was not comfortable for the person who attacked you. The answer was someone who has been somewhere, someone assembled differently, someone whose floor is so far down that this level of pressure never reaches it. Someone you do not push carelessly when you do not know what is waiting on the other side of the push. The attack was designed to establish dominance. What it established instead was that the attacker needed the reaction more than you needed to withhold it. What was supposed to be your exposure became theirs. Every person in that room updated their understanding permanently on both of you. Your non-reaction was the move. The whole board changed on a silence, and you felt that shift. Even if you did not have the words for it in the moment, even if you were simply standing there being exactly who you are, some part of you registered the change in the room's temperature. The way the energy redistributed, the way the attention moved, The way the person who arrived intending to diminish you suddenly occupied less space, not more. You did not cause that by doing something. You caused it by being 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 something, by being someone so settled in your own foundation that the attempt to unsettle you had nowhere to land. The room did not give you power in that moment. The room recognized power that was already present. There is a difference. Power given by a room can be taken back by the same room when circumstances change. Power recognized is simply acknowledged. It exists regardless of whether the room chooses to see it on any given day. What happened in that space was recognition. And recognition, once it happens, permanently changes the relationship between you and every person who was there to witness it. There is a specific mental loop that runs when a social strategy fails in a way that cannot be explained away. The loop works like this. Return to the moment, search for an alternative explanation, fail to find one that holds, feel the discomfort of the unresolved, and return to the moment again. It is exhausting, it is consuming, and it is running somewhere in a quiet room right now. What keeps the loop running is not that the attack failed. Attacks fail sometimes, and that can be rationalized. What cannot be rationalized is the quality of your non-reaction. A non-reaction that comes from suppression has edges. You can see the effort in it, the slight over-control, the deliberateness that signals something is being managed underneath. That version is readable. Someone who was just barely holding it together can be filed away as barely holding it together. Your composure had none of that. It had no edges, no visible effort. Without the ability to locate the management, there is no story available that keeps the attacker in a position of power. The only stories that remain are the ones that make the situation worse, that you are stronger than estimated, which means being outmatched, or that the attack was cruel to someone who was already beyond being wounded that way, which means being the villain. Neither story is useful. Both point in the same direction, and the loop will keep running because neither story closes the file. Here is what will settle into the attacker over time like a slow realization. Your response, or the absence of it, was not despite what you have been through. It was because of it. The very mechanism used to try to break you is the same mechanism that built your defense. Every attempt to reach you contributed to the armor rather than finding a gap in it. There was never going to be a version of that attack that worked, because the strategy depended on a vulnerability that was dismantled long before the attack was ever designed. You have already moved on. The loop is not yours. Every time you hold your ground under genuine pressure, not manufactured pressure, not a test you knew was coming, but real public pressure with real witnesses and real stakes, you install something permanent, a new data point in the internal record of what you are capable of. Proof, not theory, of where your actual floor is. Proof operates differently than belief. Belief needs reinforcement. Proof just exists, logged, permanent, and available the next time something comes at you. You are different now than you were before that room. Not dramatically and not visibly, but at the level where it matters, the level of what you know about yourself. The record has been updated. You have evidence now, not a feeling that you could probably hold steady, evidence that you did, under real conditions, in front of real witnesses, against a real and calculated attempt to break you. That evidence makes the next hard moment smaller, not easier, smaller, closer to a category you have already handled, and each time you handle the next one, the record updates again. This is how the composure compounds, not by working harder at it, by surviving the moments that test it, and noticing afterward that you are still standing. Something else happens too, something that extends beyond what you know about yourself into what others know about you. The room updated its understanding of you, and that update does not expire. Every time you enter a space where someone who was present carries that memory, you are preceded by a version of yourself that already demonstrated something significant. You do not have to re-establish it. You do not have to remind anyone. It exists in the room ahead of you, carried by the people who were there and passed along, often without them fully realizing it, to the people who were not. Your reputation is now built on something real, not what you said about yourself, not what you projected or performed, what you actually did, under actual pressure, when the cost of holding steady was visible to everyone watching. That kind of reputation cannot be argued with. It was witnessed. What was engineered as your undoing handed you a confirmation you did not even know you were still seeking. The person who designed that moment did not know they were participating in your upgrade. The intention was to take something. The result was delivering proof, and the proof belongs to you now, permanently, undeniably, regardless of what anyone else in that room decides to believe about what happened. Chosen ones do not arrive at this kind of strength by accident. The specific combination of difficulties, the exact configuration of pressures, losses and recoveries that built the person who stood in that room without flinching was not random. This kind of composure does not grow in comfort. It grows in the conditions of being tested past the point where most people stop and continuing anyway. It grows through being stripped of comfortable supports and discovering that those supports were never the actual source of what was holding you up. It grows through going deep enough into darkness that you find what is true about you when nothing external is propping you up. That process does not arrive randomly. It arrives for people who are already carrying something that made them capable of completing it. The difficulty does not create the strength from nothing. It reveals the strength that was already present, waiting for pressure sufficient to make it visible. You were always going to be this. The storms did not manufacture you. The storms uncovered you. There is a justice in what happened in that room, not the loud, punishing kind, but the quiet, structural kind that requires no enforcement from you. What was attempted was the reduction of someone who could not be reduced. The failure of that attempt, in front of witnesses, with the full attention of everyone present, carries its own consequence. You do not need to administer it. It was built into the structure of the moment itself. The confirmation is already circulating. The story is already traveling, and every version of that story, in every mouth it passes through, points in the same direction, toward you. There is something you need to be prepared for. When a move fails this publicly, the response is rarely immediate retreat. The ego does not absorb public failure gracefully. What follows instead is escalation, louder attempts, sharper provocations, a ramping up of pressure, because the alternative is admitting that the approach was never going to work. And that admission is the one thing the ego resists most completely. Let the escalation come. Every additional failed attempt produces another update to the ongoing calculation. Every time the pressure increases and you remain steady, the evidence compounds. The case that says the power in this dynamic has permanently relocated gets another piece added without you doing anything at all except continuing to exist at the level you already exist at. But here is the part that matters most, and this part is only for you. Do not start performing the steadiness for the audience that is now watching. This is the trap that catches people after a moment like this. The eyes are on you now, and something can tempt you toward making sure the composure stays visible, engineering situations where the calm can be witnessed, positioning yourself so the unbothered demeanor registers with the right people. The moment the genuine becomes manufactured, the whole thing loses its foundation, because the room that felt the real thing will feel the performance too, even before the words arrive to describe the difference. Your only job, now as before, is to keep doing what was already working, building, moving, and investing your attention in what actually belongs to you. The strength that showed in that room was a byproduct of who you have been becoming. The way to honor it is to keep becoming that person. Not for the witnesses, not for the people theorizing, for the version of you that did the private work when nobody was watching, and who deserves to see that work continue to compound into something greater. The moment was the proof. Your life going forward is the argument. And here is what that argument looks like in practical terms. It does not look like constant composure under dramatic pressure. It looks like the ordinary days, the days when nothing is being tested publicly, the days when the work is invisible and the progress is quiet, and there is no audience to register the choices you are making. It looks like the moment you choose not to respond to something beneath your level, when no one would know the difference either way. It looks like the decision to invest your energy in building rather than defending, in creating rather than reacting, in moving toward what is yours rather than standing guard over ground that has already been won. Every one of those ordinary choices is the argument. Every day you operate from your actual standard, not the surface standard you show to rooms that have not earned more, but the deep one, the real one, the one that showed itself in that room without your permission, is another sentence in a case that is becoming impossible to argue against. The dramatic moments are just the punctuation. The life is the text. Come back to the room. Come back to the moment just before the smile. You are standing there. The attack has landed. The audience is holding its breath. The person who delivered it is waiting for the explosion with the confidence of someone who has never missed before. And here is what your body already understands in that moment, even before the mind catches up to the language for it. You have been here before. Not this room, and not these exact words, but this pressure, this specific quality of being targeted, exposed and tested in front of people with the full expectation of breaking. You have been here in the private rooms, in the unseen seasons, in the moments that demanded everything with no audience and no reward for holding together. You have been here often enough that the nervous system that would have flinched in an earlier version of your life has been rebuilt around a center of gravity so deep and so solid that what arrives in this room does not reach it. The smile is not a strategy. It is a recognition, the recognition that you have already survived the worst version of this moment. What stands in front of you now is not a threat. It is a test you have already taken and already passed, in harder rooms with higher stakes and no one watching to confirm that you made it through. The smile is simply the truth of your position, arriving on your face without permission, because there is nothing underneath it that needs to be hidden. The moment the attack arrived was not the moment your strength was tested. Your strength was tested in every quiet moment before this one that nobody saw, in the private seasons of rebuilding, in the unglamorous, unrewarded work of choosing, over and over, to get back up and keep going when stopping was the more available option. All of those moments, the ones with no audience, no applause, no external confirmation that the work was doing anything, those were the real story. This room was the public confirmation of something that had already been decided long before anyone in it arrived. The wound became the work became the armor became the smile, and the smile, real, unforced, and genuinely unbothered, shook a room full of people and sent someone home unable to sleep, not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. Your past is not owed to people who only noticed you when you stopped reacting to their nonsense. Your survival is not content for speculation. Your transformation belongs to you. What belongs to the people in that room is the confirmation, public, permanent, and witnessed, that whatever they assumed about you, they were wrong, completely, irreversibly wrong, and what belongs to you is everything else. Let that land, not as consolation, as a statement of fact. You walked out with the audience permanently recalibrated in your direction. You did not demand that. You did not campaign for it. It happened because the truth of who you are, the genuine, unperformed, deeply built truth, is more compelling than any attack launched against it. The attack needed the room to believe a particular story about you. The truth of you simply showed up, and the story collapsed on its own. That is not luck. That is what it looks like when the work you did in private finally meets a public moment large enough to reflect it back. You are going to keep building. You are going to keep moving in the direction of what belongs to you. And as you do, you will find that the moment in that room becomes less of an event you carry and more of a confirmation you have already filed and moved past. Because chosen ones do not stop at the proof. Proof is not the destination. Proof is the marker that shows you how far you have already come and points at how much further you are designed to go. The calm that was read as weakness was always power. The stillness that was read as passivity was always strategy. The silence that was read as surrender was always the deepest kind of dominance, the kind that does not need to announce itself, does not need to be confirmed, and does not need the room to understand it in order to be completely structurally real. Chosen one, something was awakened in that room that cannot be put back to sleep, and you have not even begun.